Have you ever had buyer's remorse? You know what I mean, right? It's when you go out and you make that big purchase, or you spend a lot of money, or you make that big decision, and maybe a few minutes or a few hours later, you're thinking, oh my Lord, what have I just gotten myself into? What have I done? Maybe it's the sticker shock when you get that first bill for that new car that you just bought, where the payment is due. And all of a sudden you think, why in the world did I do that? Buyer's remorse. It's something we all feel, right? We've all been there, done, and felt the kind of emotion that kind of gathers in our stomach, the questioning and the wondering. Today's gospel story is a story that's kind of filled with a couple of what seem like contradictions, two important things that just don't seem to quite fit. It's a story about actually the turning point in the story of Jesus' life. In the Gospel of Mark, the entire Gospel is divided into two parts. The part before this encounter and the part after. And this is right in the middle of the book. Up to this point, Jesus is focusing on helping people to figure out who he is. And after this point, he's going to focus on helping people to figure out what is he doing. And in this story, Jesus comes to the disciples with an important question. And as he's asking this question, I thought to myself, is Jesus wondering if they have some buyer's remorse about following after him? Are they regretting their decision, maybe thinking twice about it? So Jesus asks them this question. Well, who do the people say that I am? And they give all these answers because Jesus is a pretty popular figure. Everybody wants to follow him, and everybody's kind of a say-so in who he is and what he's supposed to be doing. So they give the answers. John the Baptist raised from the dead, a prophet, a great teacher, whatever. And then he asks them the most important question. But who do you think that I am? And Peter ventures forth and says, Messiah, right? And it's almost as if there's been this unspoken dialogue, this question, this wondering. Is Jesus really the Messiah? Is he that person that we're waiting for? And finally they're having that talk and addressing what they've been thinking about for so long. Peter openly confesses what all the disciples are believing and hoping for, that Jesus is the Messiah. And as soon as he says it, I'm sure that they have this sense of anticipation. Okay, we said it. We're the Messiah. We've gotten it out in the open now. Now we can be bold in proclaiming it everywhere we go, right? Immediately Jesus says, oh, don't tell anybody. Keep it to yourselves. And thus we have this first kind of, I don't have a word for it, contradiction, oxymoron, weird moment, when all of a sudden Jesus says something that doesn't quite make sense. Because if he's really the Messiah, why wouldn't you boldly announce it? Why would you take an ad out in the paper and get a commercial or get some advertising and, let the world know? Because everybody's been waiting for you. But Jesus says, no, you can't tell anybody. And as we read this story, I stop every time I read this. I've read it, a couple dozen times or 100 times or so, and every time I'm thinking, okay, why? And this isn't the first time Jesus has said something like this. In fact, throughout the Gospel of Mark, he does this all the time. And there's this interesting encounter that happens a couple months before the story that helps shed some light on why would Jesus say, don't tell anyone. And it's when Jesus is going to, he's traveling along the road as he normally does, and there's these 10 lepers, and he heals all 10 of them. And he tells them, he tells them to go to the temple and go through the process of declaring themselves ritually clean so they can re-enter society again and get their lives back. And as you go to the temple, you will be clean. And of course they do that, and they're all healed, and they're all cleansed, and they all get their lives back. They're no longer going to be ostracized and having to live outside of the city in a special camp. Their lives are changed. They get back what they had lost. And after this is done, of those 10 lepers, only one of them comes back and actually thanks Jesus for healing them. And Jesus out loud asks the question, well, here's one of the 10. Where are the other 9? And what seems to have happened is that they came, they encountered Jesus, they asked for help, he gave them help, and they rejoiced and went on and lived their lives the way that they wanted, thinking that Jesus was there just so that they could have the life they always dreamed of. And Jesus openly says, but wait a minute. In those words, where are the other 9? Somehow those other 9 have missed out on one of the most important points about why they got this healing. It was not so that they could live the life that they always dreamed, but so that they could encounter God and be changed by it and live a life with God. And so here we have all of these people following Jesus for the wrong reasons, or for varying reasons, and even having lots of different ideas about who Jesus is. A great teacher, a great prophet, a revolutionary, this and that. And Jesus is amidst that and trying to do this incredible thing, and there's all this misunderstanding. Is it to emphasize the point? Jesus is going to explain some of the things he's going to do, and what does Peter say? He pulls him aside and rebukes him when he says, I'm going to suffer and die on the cross. Jesus says, oh, Peter pulls him aside and says, no, we're talking about you suffering. You're the Messiah. The Messiah doesn't do those kinds of things. The Messiah is my hero, right? He's my guy that's going to be the victor. He's going to be the guy that's going to change the world. He's the guy that I believe in. He's my hero. And yet Jesus is saying something very different than what Peter is expecting or wanting out of his Messiah. And so he's going to actually dare to rebuke Jesus. Imagine that. Imagine going up to Jesus and rebuking him. Kind of like a parent rebukes a child, right? You know you're in trouble when you're going to, come on, laugh with me here. Think about the absurdity of this, right? He's rebuking God. You know you're going to get in trouble if you try and rebuke God, right? And of course that's what happened. He gets a stern talking to when Jesus says to him, get behind me, Satan. And it's a very powerful kind of slap in the face from Jesus, figuratively. No one wants to be called Satan. No one wants to be told, get behind me, right? But he's trying to emphasize for Peter and for the disciples and anybody else that might be peering in and listening, like we are, to the story of how important it is simply that we don't get to create our own Messiah. We don't get to take Jesus on our own terms. We don't get to define who Jesus is or to describe what kind of hero we're going to have. Because Jesus comes to us as Jesus is, the Son of God, who has a mission. And we need to embrace Jesus for who Jesus really is, not for whom we want him to be. And here we see the second kind of contradiction, oxymoron, confusing point. Because when Jesus says, when they finally have this, get it out in the open, they have this discussion that he's the Messiah, he's the Savior, he's their hero, what's the next thing Jesus is going to say? Well, by the way, I'm going to suffer and have horrible things happen to me, and I'm going to, on the surface, it looks like I'm going to lose. And we all know if there's one thing that a hero does, right? Because we've all watched Disney movies, right? What does the hero do at the end of every movie? In Disney movie? Wins, right? Conquers all, right? Beats down the enemy, right? The hero doesn't suffer. The hero isn't humiliated, well, maybe for just a short time. But not like what Jesus is explaining, because the hero's going to come and do what heroes do. Vanquish everybody and become the hero. And here we have Jesus saying, no, instead of doing what you think I'm going to do, I'm actually going to suffer. I'm actually going to be humiliated. Even though I have the power and the strength to be otherwise, I am going to take my life and give it up as a sacrifice so that others can be connected to God, so that others can receive forgiveness. The suffering hero. The hero that's not going to beat everybody down, but instead is going to try and reconcile everybody to God in one glorious, glorious event. That's who Jesus is. And Peter comes face to face with Jesus and has to decide, is he going to follow Jesus, who Jesus really is, a suffering hero, this kind of countercultural icon who's going to act in ways that people just don't expect him to act as the hero or the Messiah? Is he going to accept Jesus like that? Or is he going to say, no, I only want Jesus on my own terms. I only want my own kind of Messiah who's going to give me the things that I want and help me to live the life that I've always dreamed of. Kind of like those 9 lepers. You see where we're going here? Because we are often just like Peter when we say to God, that's not the way it's going to be. Because we take God on our own terms and we define God and who Jesus is to help God to fit into our lives and to give us the lives that we've always dreamed of. Let me give you just one example. And it's all around this idea of busyness. And it goes really well with my life right now because I'm really busy. So busy I forgot to bring my jersey today to church. It just totally slipped my mind. But we are all busy people, right? Because our culture has taught us that we have to be busy. We have to be accomplishing things, right? Even those of you who are retired, I look at your schedules and I think, wow, you guys are busy people. Because we have to fill up our schedule, because that's the way the world has taught us. This is how life is supposed to be. You're supposed to be accomplishing things and making something of your life, right? And yet God tells us, no. What you're supposed to do, instead of being super busy and trying to accomplish all of these things, instead, you're supposed to be giving up your life and receiving a new life in exchange. A life that you lead not as the world has taught you to lead your life, but a life where you sit in fellowship with me and bringing others into this grand celebration. A very different life than what the world expects of us. And what we tend to do as Christians is that we tend to invite Jesus into our lives and say, okay, I've got room next Thursday morning, every other Sunday, and maybe once a month on Tuesdays, and that's going to be your time, Jesus. And we try to fit Jesus into our already busy lifestyles that are wrapped around us, where we're trying to accomplish all of these wonderful, great things. And many of the things we do on the surface are great and wonderful things. However, we're missing the boat. We're missing and not understanding that life is all about us having a relationship with God, not fitting God into our already hectically busy